This will be a very interesting session for our merchants, since many are constantly hitting a ceiling with growth, trying to find new ways to generate revenue when there's a slump in traffic and conversions, right? And Jonathan, you have lots of experience in helping DTC e-commerce brands grow, coming to get more engines running. When we talked, it was so insightful to learn how growth possibilities are massive and merchants don't usually know about that. And we thought it would be very valuable for merchants to learn from you and your experience. So before we dive into the details, can you tell us a bit about your background, what led you to focus on helping DTC brands grow, and what's been your journey so far as a fractional CMO?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for being here. And yeah, I've been in the marketing space for 20 plus years. I like to say I'm a recovered investment banker and private equity professional. I started my career in finance. Uh, and I bring that up because it did build the foundation that I think I've carried through and looking back now all the way through to my marketing. And really, what that is I've spent the majority of my career in the marketing space, at the intersection of brand and performance marketing. And the performance part is really data driven, and that's where I've kind of brought my finance background into this and understanding not just what's going on in metrics in things like Meta, but how's that all the way affecting the bottom line to contribution margin and profitability for a brand. I've done this across a range of industries and brands and companies from early stage, pre-startup or startup, I guess, pre-launch, pre-revenue to Fortune 100 and 500 brands, and really have taken that experience that has allowed me to kind of like pivot and be flexible across a lot of industries, a lot of different size brands, which is, I think, what has made me hopefully a successful, or at least kept me very well busy as a fractional CMO. Before being a fractional CMO, which I've been doing just about 4 years, I ran a startup for just about 3 years that was bootstrapped and doing under 2 million in revenue when I started with them, and when I exited, we were doing 30 million plus in venture backed. And prior to that, I had spent lots of years both on the agency side, doing a lot of brand strategy, big marketing campaigns to performance marketing, all the way down to a lot of consumer insights, and been part of, I want to say, internally about a half a dozen startups, not as part of my fractional CMO, but as being an operator, I guess.
A lot to learn from your experience. So, when starting to scale, when you're coming to a DTC brand and you want to start scaling it, what foundational elements do you focus on first to ensure sustainable long-term growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. I come from a brand world, and I got into marketing before performance marketing, before you could just, and while things have changed over the last 2 3 years, even in the performance world, when the heydays of kind of the D2C world, where any company, I don't even want to call brand, could launch and gain very quick scale. I started my career way before that, and what that means is I like to work with, and where I've been most successful is starting with brands and really understanding their unique value proposition as a brand. What's their why do they exist, and how does that play into the customer that they're trying to attract? Aligning kind of that brand positioning and messaging with the right product and the consumer insights, I think, is the foundation for any brand. Um, there's a lot of companies and brands, and not in them, that started without that, and even got some traction. But I think where I've seen, and I've stepped into some of those situations to help them figure this out post 10 million, even one that was at 50 million, which was, why are people actually even buying our product? How do we get to 100 million? Because we're seeing a lot of different things going on in our business. And to me, it came back with they never created that foundation even to begin with. Um, Building a brand and building that foundation can take time, can take money, and a lot of times entrepreneurs don't have time, don't have the money, don't have the patience, and you need to do both at the same time, in my opinion. If you're not building that brand and that foundation in the beginning, and you're not focused on your product, you're not focusing on your packaging, and you're not focusing on your customer experience, your customer service experience, as quickly as you can grow that acquisition funnel, you're not going to be able, one, you're not going to be able to have that retention funnel working. And two, the acquisition funnel is going to start to slow down because people are going to start getting that message that this is not the product's not that good or living up to the expectation people have. So that's where I like to start on. I think second, when you get into, okay, how do you start to scale a brand, is focus on one channel initially. Everyone likes to go to Meta. That's probably still the lowest cost that you can get to. Doesn't matter what it is. If you have a belief or and understand that maybe your audience is someplace else, start with one channel. And typically, depending on your funding and your capital, is you're not going to have the time or the resources, the money to do too many things. And so you want to be very good at one. Now, if that channel doesn't work, then you got to learn to pivot very quickly and go and find another channel or understand what is not working in your business. Maybe it's the product or something else not working. But start with one channel and get really good at it. And you can take most channels, the big channels, to pretty large scales. So, almost every brand today in the DTC world starts in Meta. There's so many conversations today around diversification. I'm not going to say what the right time or wrong time to do that is, but there is still plenty of opportunity and runway for most good brands and businesses to be doing 100 million plus on, with that being their core acquisition channel. And so I like to say, start with one, get really good at it, get really smart at it, understand who your audience is coming from there, and then that will help you figure out where to go next. The other major thing, and I see this a lot as a fractional CMO, is keep your tech stack simple. There's a lot of great SaaS platforms out there, and I'm going to say great. There's some not good ones, but everyone's trying to sell on, use this and you're going to get this great return or this conversion. There could be two truths there. That could be true, but at the same time, if you have a small team and a limited budget, how are you going to manage all these things? I think I learned that the hard way when I was running a startup. I remember a very specific platform that we invested in. We saw a decent return off it, but we were probably doing 5% what that platform should have been doing for us. And it's because we had no time or a team that could focus on it. And so at the end of the day, could we have gotten a better return by focusing on other areas than using that? And that was the thing. And I see that a lot too with people using 3 platforms where they can use one that does the same thing as well. It's not that you may get something better out of that second or third platform to do part of it, but you really want your team logging into 3 different platforms, trying to figure out attribution across 3 different platforms, trying to understand what's working. And so really those are the kind of the 3 things I look at, like set your brand, make sure you have a really strong brand foundation, focus on a channel and get really good at it, and keep it simple as long as possible until you really can invest either the people or the resources to do other things.
Interesting. So what acquisition strategies when we talk about new customers, what acquisition strategies have you found to be the most effective from your experience for D2C brand? Because it's a saturated market, a lot of competition. For every product, there are several similar products out there, right, that are branding and working hard. What did you find is the most effective acquisition strategy?
I still think there's a lot of room, as I mentioned, in traditional paid media. The difference today than it was 3-4 years ago is your creative. Can you develop the right creative through lots of different means to find that allows Meta and the algorithm to find the right audience that tells that value proposition or tells that brand story in any way, shape, or form that gets someone to come over to your website. So I still think, that is the crucial area to customer acquisition. Now, that being said, I was just having this conversation the other night at a DTC event I was at. I think you really need to understand the buying behavior of your customer and why are they discovering your product and not. I'll get into very specifically, there was a lot of debate, does Google work for brands? I'm not going to have that debate or not, but I made the point around a brand that I ran where it was very successful and incrementally successful, which is the debate out there around it being incremental. Because even with, we had limited competition. I say that there was definitely limited brand competition. There was plenty of product
Mm-hmm.
competition for what we sold. Um, but it was a product that people did not know where to find it and how to find it. And when you don't know where to find something, you Google it and you can win there. And when I say Google, I'm talking about paid ads. It could also be SEO. It could be a lot of other things going on in that platform. But for us to now we got to a point where we could scale, and we always had money being spent on Instagram, but where we can scale it is when we're able to find this tipping point that we could then find an audience better on Instagram and go there. But there was still this huge audience that said, I want this product. I know what this is. And I'm talking about, I don't know where to get it because it's not a pair of jeans.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You would never Google what jeans do I want to buy, but there's plenty of products you think about that's still a very powerful place to go search. So, um,
Yep.
just coming back to the question of acquisition, like it's paid media, I think is clearly where the number one place that I'm telling brands, where we should go, but how we should be doing it the most successfully. And we can get into that later if we want. But also like where your customer is and trying to find them at the right point in that. Um, I think the other big thing that for a lot of brands today, again, and where I play in the branding space, is how do you increase your word of mouth marketing? This could be, your traditional influencer, which I still think there's plenty of opportunity for, maybe not in your macro world, but it's the notion about how do you get more people to talk about your product, and what social media and paid media has allowed that is to amplify that faster than ever. And so it could be influencers, it could be your current customers, it could be a lot of different strategies around that. But how do we get more people talking about the product, which will help then our ads when they're performing? Because if I have other people, even if they are paid and sponsored, saying, "Oh, this is the great T-shirt in the world," and then you're seeing an ad, it's just reinforcing that message over and over. And so, to me, acquisition is about how do you reinforce the message as many times as possible, and that also goes down to, as I mentioned before, like what's the experience the customer's having. So, if they're having a very simple, easy website experience, like that is an acquisition strategy. You got to get people to the website first. But if it's difficult to check out, difficult to understand the product, does the product come in a reasonable amount of time, given our
Right.
expectations from Amazon are so quick? Does it come in a way that makes me feel like all this effort to buy this product, because even if it is effort, looking at ad, clicking on something was worth it because the way I opened that package, the way it looked, the way it came. I was working with a client recently, and in a pretty a do-it-yourself construction type product, but a
Mm-hmm.
DTC brand. And everyone sells samples of their product in a cardboard box and shaking around and just kind of, there's no marketing. It's like, hey, great, I got 2 samples of this product. Where these guys, it comes in a nice box, tissue wrapped, marketing collateral, and says, okay, well, if I'm gonna go buy this product after I like the sample, I'm already feeling better about that. It's a higher quality. That there's probably a customer service team behind here. There's a lot more going on, and that's all part of acquisition. Um, so
Yeah.
um, I think the last thing I'm seeing a lot in acquisition too is, and we're going to see it, starting. I think everyone's talking about, November 7th through 9th is, after the election is the holiday period. I think discounting is an acquisition strategy, but it also is a very tricky one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been spending a lot of time on how do we discount in different or marketing unique ways. Are we not giving a discount on the first purchase, but giving a discount to come back through some type of store credit or cash back offer? Are we, we're testing a lot with, Hello Rep, like abandoned cart type, last minute discount. So we're not giving a discount up front, but we see you're about to abandon your cart. Okay, do we insert one there because we the algorithm has figured out that that's happening, and so there's a lot of things there that I'm talking to my clients about, especially ones who don't love to discount, but understand that they're going to need to. How do we do it in a way that is just not big sale all the time on our brand?
Right. Not slamping 50% all the time just to convince,
Yeah.
but doing more sophisticated way of discounting. So getting customers in, new customers in is one thing, and that's a big challenge, getting them to buy. But retention, right, as you said, is a whole different ballgame. There is a
Yeah.
lot of challenges there. Now, with the rising cost of acquisition, right, paid acquisitions that we just talked about, how can a DTC brand create strategies that foster long-term retention and not just one buy?
Yeah. Um, retention, everyone talks about, the typical life cycle marketing and emails. What I find, at least the clients and the brands I've worked with, is they do a lot of kind of set it and forget it type of retention marketing. Set up their emails, their flows, and then just let it go. And expect, oh, I send out an email, and people are just going to come back and buy again. Um, I think retention is a lot of what I've talked about before. Is starts with understanding who your customer is, why they're buying your product, how are they using your product, and how can you then encourage them or help them along that journey to buy it again. Um, it starts with, not to say it again, but it starts with, that first purchase, right? The experience they had, the experience getting the product, buying the product, opening the product, and then eventually using the product. You're already there. And how do you measure to make sure that you're doing that? I'm a big fan of, using post-purchase surveys, using NPS scores to make sure that um, there are hidden things that we may not be seeing that if we can surface them, we can fix them. Um, the next thing is, are we talking to our customers at the right time and with the right messaging? Um, so, for example, the client I was just talking about sends a sample out um, for the longest time, and they are, doing 50 million plus in revenue. They were sending the same post purchase to every single one of their customers. The person who bought the $12 sample or spent $1,000 when they bought the full thing that they were buying. Um, it's a completely different post purchase experience given you need the sample buyer to come back and buy again. And so we spent a lot of time to try to understand who that customer is, because within there was actually a couple different customer cohorts that we identified, and how could we build a retention strategy that spoke to each one of those at different parts of that process. If they were buying a sample, depending on who they were, all the way to what's the post purchase, and then helping get them back if they already bought the full product, but maybe there's an upsell or another product we can get them 6 months later or another time later. And so part of that was, how do we increase that? I also look a lot, and not every brand does this, but I have, actually two brands right now that we've spent a lot of time of actually putting in some old school, phone calls into the process. Because we found that there could be a barrier to, acquisition or even rebuying. And we want to make sure that they know that there is a team behind here that can answer any questions, help them through that process. And so we figured out, how do we integrate that into the entire flow process of that retention lifecycle marketing. Other things that I think I spend a lot of time on that a lot of brands don't do is think about how often do you actually need this product again. And someone buys something and then they get 10 emails right after they bought it. It's like, well, I just got this pair of shoes. I don't need another pair. And I know somebody, if you're a brand that's more diversified, the argument's like, well, we want to get them to go buy the t-shirt or the shorts now. Maybe, but are we doing enough to nurture and make sure they're having a good enough experience that they want to buy these other products? If it's a single item brand, when should this customer need the product again? And I think the default measure for a lot of brands was subscription, things like that. But that's allowing the consumer to say, oh, I think I want it every 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 6 months or whatever. How do we get smarter using data to figure out when that customer should need this product again, and then giving them the right message that it's time to replenish or your shoes are probably worn out, so it's time to
Mhm.
get a new pair or something like that. So using that through email, SMS, of course, spending a lot of time with direct mail as just a more tactile way of seeing how customers do that. And then, of course, on the website, and not being plugged, but if we can identify when they come back and we can build a more personalized experience, and some of the things again we're doing with chat is recognize that the customer is coming back, and can we train the AI to then understand why, when they came back, how often they've come back, and what they're coming back for is something that we're looking into.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tech stack out there, right? For a merchant, he looks at
Yeah.
that, it goes into Shopify marketplace, and there are so many options for growth tools, right? For a merchants, and how can they balance that?
Yeah. Um, I think I always look at tools. I guess first is, as I said before, um, I want to keep tech stacks simple. So are we using, the fewest amount of tools to do the most amount of things until we're at different scales that we need to start to maybe take a part of a tool and give it to someone who's doing that part better by keeping that one. Um, but once we do that, the other big thing I look at with this is, what is the ROI we're expecting from this? What are we trying to solve for? And
Mhm.
what's the return we're going to get for that? I think there's been a lot of talk around SaaS pricing, and a lot of these tools have gotten so expensive, or charging by sessions or things like that. And it can get very expensive. I've seen some very expensive tech stacks. The question not being asked is, are we optimizing each one of these for the value that they're bringing to us? Um, and do we have a reasonable ROI against that that really doesn't make it a cost? It's really a revenue driver for the brand.
Right.
So, I think putting that into some like reality cases in a sense, is, we're using, HelloRep and the chat there. And for one of my clients, we look at this differently for everyone, but we have a $600 AOV. So
Mm.
the ROI was pretty low in my mind, and in the team's mind, to implement this. Meaning, if we could get this to work and we could, generate 1 to 2 orders a month, and solve something, take time away, give time back to our customer service team, say, add a lot more, personal selling experience, things like that. Um, then right there is like, it's a worth a test that we can then start to optimize and get bigger. Now, I want to say, of course, because I know they're not in a business to generate just 2 orders either. And we've been a lot more successful in the early tests than 2 orders. But I think the first conversations, I had with the CEO and the team was, well, do we want to invest in another platform? Like, what's this going to cost me? We're trying to cut back. We're getting the holidays. We're not turning in. It was like this. We can't look at this as just another couple $100 costs. It's, let's go generate 2 or 3 orders. Then we don't have to think about it. And we're thinking about, how do we get, if we get 4 orders the first month, how do we get 8 the next, and then 16, and then 32, and keep doubling it every month? And so it seems like a pretty simple conversation, but I'm shocked on how many times I'm looking at platforms and technologies that I think can help grow a business, because it's something that we can't do on our own. And that's the other thing we look at. Can we do this on our own with a few hours or multiple hours? Or can we, is it going to be faster for us to use this tool? Um, but so much of the initial pushback is, well, what's it going to, it's going to cost me X amount. Um, I'll give another example. I was having a different platform that I use that's tech enabled. The client literally this week was said, do we have to, well, we have to pay per cost per use, but there's also a platform fee for this. Do we have to really pay for the platform fee? Is there any flexibility? And again, this is actually another different client, but another high AOV client, that these guys AOV is in the thousands, and the
Mhm.
platform cost doesn't even come close to that. So I'm like, all the tools we get just for that platform fee is going to give us a lot of data and insights. But we need one conversion just in our tests, just so you feel good about the expense. That's not our end game. If we only get one conversion, it's not worth our time. but we can't be thinking about spending a couple $100 a month and you're trying to cut budget when I'm looking for incremental dollars to bring into this business. And if I can do $5,000 on a $500 cost of thing, don't we want to do that all day long? And it doesn't take too much time for us. So it's to me, I even saying it sounds really simple, but it's shocking the number of conversations I have with entrepreneurs who rightly so are looking at every line item in their P&L right now and trying to cut, but not thinking about if we invest a little time up front, what can we get off the return of this? And so
Right.
it's a long way of me saying like, that's how I view all this tech. I think the other big thing is I kind of alluded to is just how much more efficient can we be as a team? Um, you know, does this tool not just generate revenue for us, but does it make us more efficient in a way that we can spend time doing other things? You know, one of the things that I'm really excited about, like with the AI chat stuff, is not just the revenue it's generating, but it's the insights that we're getting on the business that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
So, you know, what we're looking at a lot is not just that, but why are people asking these questions? You know, how, you know, while we can do a lot of A/B testing and website optimizations, they're telling us right now they can't find how sizing works. Well, okay, that's something we can now fix and make the website better, or train the AI better, but we can do both those things and they're going to be better. You know, we're seeing, you know, shipping is an issue up front before they even got to checkout, like they need this product. How do we communicate that better? So that's allowing us to use our time and energy and brains to like solve those problems versus chatting online with people and answering questions all day long, or doing other things that, you know, our CX team had to do. They can now look at that data and then give recommendations to the team and say, hey, we need to like make, like I said, shipping times more prevalent because there's a lot of these chats going on and I don't have to answer them anymore, but now we can solve it a lot faster.
Right. So immediately that brings value, right? Because people
Yeah.
are not approaching the support anymore because we
Right.
found what was the problem
Yeah.
through data, through the chat. Yeah, definitely, definitely. There's so much value there. And you know, we talk about how can brands succeed. You work with really some big brands in e-com, and it's always you look at them and say they always do things so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some common mistakes that you've experienced with founders, with brands out there that they did when they're trying to scale, and how can other brands that are watching can avoid that?
Yeah. There's two high level things that I see that I've kind of I've talked about a few times here. I think the first is scaling too quickly without building that solid brand foundation. Um, what this often leads to, even when they've already gone to a bigger place, is a misaligned customer expectations and even a diluted brand value, even though they weren't even trying to build their brand at the time. They weren't thinking about that. And so there becomes so much focus on, you know, direct response, performance marketing, and the ups and downs of that and all the things that happen. And because they haven't built that brand, there's been no investment there. And then they're asking, well, why aren't people coming back? Why aren't people talking about us, as I spoke about? Why aren't people doing these things? We've spent, you know, we're spending six figures a month on paid acquisition, yet no one knows who we are. And that's because that's where the focus was. And you're now in this cycle where you got to keep spending and spending and spending, and you're probably never not going to be able to spend, but you're looking at, and you have very little organic traffic coming to the business. People aren't talking about you. People aren't, you know, promoting you. And so I think that's a huge part around that. There's lots of different ways to do that, and none of it's easy. But is it a brand that can build a community? And communities are hard to build, but there are definitely brands still today that, and a real community, because I think some brands try to build them, but you know, you don't really need to build a community around, I don't know, what brand do I want to make fun of, but, you know, something where it's a consumable product often, right? Like I don't care, but, there's a brand that I've been advising that's, in the tween golf apparel space. Um, their big focus is around community, right?
Yeah.
Empowering young female golfers to both get into the game, but also stay in the game and build awareness for that. And there's all these amazing, teenagers and younger and slightly older and going to college, girl golfers that are doing these amazing things out there. And so we're building a community around that first, that one is going to become ambassadors for the brand, but also, later on as they start to scale their spend and when they start to scale it, they'll have a foundation to look there that help fuel that growth. So that's the first thing. And I think a lot of it's, just under investing in the retention, because retention is brand building often, it is getting people to come back, but it's all the other things there as well. I think the other thing that I'm shocked at, even, big and small company that I worked at, is not looking, especially as you get bigger, there's still a lack of looking into the weeds of really what's going on in the business. So there's so much focus on, month over month and day over day revenue and hitting ROAS targets and things like that are very important. But there's so many factors that can affect those things. And so I had an experience recently where revenue was growing slightly, revenue was looking good month over month. But as you looked into it, you saw some really big swings in AOV and conversion rate that was driving some of the bigger months. Because when you looked at the underlying metrics, you actually saw new customer acquisition going down. And so the team was sort of, I don't say they were, giving high fives, but they were celebrating a good month when that good month was driven by things they did not affect with their AOV and conversion rate. There was no changes like they made. It happened. Maybe better eyes, people were in the mood to buy, which made the top line look good. But underlying, you had 2 or 3 months of declining new customer revenue for a brand that also relied on returning customer revenue, which over time, that's that trend is only going to continue to get worse. And so, and this was something that they'd, until I pointed this out to them, quite honestly, they'd been looking at the same way for months and months, if not years. Not that problem was going on for years, but they'd always been just so focused on the top line metrics without really understanding on a very granular level, like what was driving them on a monthly and daily basis, that they were kind of, blind to some of the challenges going on in their business.
That's very interesting. So what was your recommendation there?
That's a long story. There's a lot of recommendations to fix it. I think half the recommendations were very tactical, very specific changes they needed to change to how they were marketing, both from a paid media standpoint and also to a retention standpoint. The second big thing was, quite honestly, how do we start to use some tools? So going back to the technology question, to tap into areas they hadn't tapped into. So for them, one of them was, thousands and thousands of customers using their product. Not once have they, they didn't even have a very basic referral program. Like the most, they didn't have, it wasn't about like giving it, and we started to implement a more than basic one, but they didn't even have a like super basic one. And again, this was a product that doesn't have a ton of repeat purchase. So it was one where word of mouth should be very powerful. And we were seeing that in post-purchase surveys. So we saw data saying like people are hearing about this from their friends, but they were doing nothing to activate that. And so, that's one way to be less reliant on the paid media side and activate that. And then there was tons of fixes on the current acquisition tactics that they were using.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. So as the DTC landscape evolves, right? It's already really big, but it grew in the last years, and it keeps growing. And a lot of emerging trends are coming to brands. How can a small DTC brand can keep ahead of the competition?
I'd be remiss to not talk about just AI in general, and then how to use AI. I'm not the first person. I'm not going to be the last person, and I'm not the smartest person to say, AI is going to change a lot of what we do and a lot of what we do in marketing. I think we're only scratching the surface on how it's going to change. So I think there's a lot of, at least what I see, a lot of AI and talk and work around the creative side of it. Generating ads and images or a lot of other things from that standpoint. I'm spending a lot of time using it from a data analysis standpoint and how to drive better decisions around that. Clearly, we have things like chat and getting smarter there and how to encourage that. Um, I think those are just the surface of where we're going to go with it, and there's probably deeper things of the things I just mentioned, but things that I don't even know that's being worked on currently or people that are testing. But I think there's going to be a lot of um, ways especially small brands can benefit that to get smarter earlier on. I think what used to take a long time to analyze data or understand what's going on can now be solved a lot faster. That smaller brands, if they can implement a lot earlier, are going to be able to take advantage of it and hopefully be able to scale faster. So if it's on the creative side, right, you can generate creative that much more that faster. There's people helping create emails. There's a tech platform out there that's using that. So if you don't have a design team, like how fast can you get more emails out there? And if you're building your customer base, the more touch points you have, the better it's going to be. Just the analytics alone, like I said, I think there's some really interesting things that if you're a small and fast growing brand and you have enough data there to gain those insights a lot faster and without a full data analyst team, will allow you to pivot that much quicker and understand what's going on in your business and say, oh, we should be focused over here, or we should be doing something else right now because we're seeing what's happening. And so I think that's going to be a huge benefit. I don't want to say game changer because it's already happening, but the simpler it is for small brands to take advantage of that, I think the more powerful they're going to be and help break some of the mold of what it takes to be a startup. I mean, still building a product and doing all that stuff is really, really hard. But hopefully, once you kind of get through that first stage, things like this, are really going to help a lot. I think there's a lot of things around the periphery that brands need to keep doing. Um, I come back to where I started my career as a brand marketer. It's before performance was a thing. I like to joke with some people that a brand that I ran for a number of years that we successfully sold, one of our metrics was likes on Facebook because that's what people used to do. People remember that. And if you got to 10,000, you got a little badge next to your name. And we were one of the first brands in our category to get to 10,000. And so I think I'm always focused around that and what can you do? Because at the end of the day, that's going to be the differentiator often to why someone buys your product or why they come back. And is it, the packaging you use? Are you a brand that has, values that customers care about, sustainability, things like that, that I quite honestly don't think is why people buy brands, but I think it's not the reason people come to a brand, but it is a reason why people buy them and come back to them. So, and it can be sustainable, it can be 10 other things, but if you have that USP, most often they're going to first come to you because they've heard it's a good product, it's well made, and probably in a price point they're willing to afford. But what's going to convert them over your competition and get them back is going to be all those, secondary items that really make, I think, the long-lasting impact on a brand.
Right, that's true. That's true. Wow, learned so much. So many insights and learnings from you. And I do, I hope. Do you write anything anywhere? Are you
I
writing
I was
somewhere that
pretty.
people can
I
learn
tried to
more?
be active on LinkedIn. I've been a little slower recently. I think I've been a little too busy. I have a little notice on my calendar to try to remind me on a weekly basis. I'm going to get back into that. So, yeah, I definitely try to share some of the things that I'm seeing on LinkedIn a lot.
Okay.
And I love doing, participate in a lot of panels and webinars and things like this to hopefully share. And, so, I think the best way to follow me is definitely on LinkedIn,
Okay.
and people can reach out to me through there as well. And I'm pretty good at getting back to them. Sometimes it's early in the morning, 2 a.m. type things, but they don't have to respond back to me at those hours either.
That's great. So we'll add the your LinkedIn, and I'm sure people would reach out directly. Also, there's a lot to learn, and thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you.
and your
Thank you
insight.
very
It
much.
was wonderful. We'll be have a great weekend
You
ahead.
too.
Bye bye.
Bye.